So you found a house and you want to make an offer, but what is an offer? Is it a contract? Is it an agreement? Or is it just an offer? Let's find out in today's video. Welcome back to our home buyer video series. Today we're going to be talking about what it means to put in an offer and what are the terms of a contract, which in Georgia is not even actually called a contract, it's called an agreement. So when you hear me referring to agreement or contract in this video, I'm referring to what a lot of people would call a contract, but it's actually an agreement. So let me start off by answering the question of what is an offer. So yes, when you finally start seeing homes you want to purchase and the word offer starts getting thrown around, it is one of the same things as writing up an agreement. It's just an offer at that point because you, the buyer, are the only one who signed it. In order for it to become referred to as what we say under contract, or the actual term in Georgia known as a binding agreement, both the buyer and the seller have to sign off on it. So now let's talk about what will be the main terms we will need to think about in order to make your offer stand out to the seller. The first big item that's going to be the biggest deciding factor is the purchase price. So the seller obviously has a list price of what they're asking for the home, and it would be nice if every time we could just match the list price with our purchase price or offer price and just get the house under contract. But depending on the market and depending on how well the listing agent and the seller price the home, and also depending on the location, the condition, and the features of the home, that all has an impact on what you as the buyer feel like would be the best purchase price that you want to offer. Because in a super hot market where there's lots of buyer demand as not many homes for sale, that's referred to as seller's market, and the list price can sometimes just be the starting point of what buyers are prepared to offer for a home. In a softer market where there's lots of homes for sale and not many buyers, this is more known as a buyer's market, and the buyer holds the cards and can be more choosy of which home they want to offer on and may be able to negotiate a purchase price that is lower than the list price than the seller's asking for. The second big item to consider on the offer or purchase agreement is the closing costs. The way the agreement words it is to consider how much you are going to ask the seller to pay towards your closing costs. Closing costs can be a lot of things, but mostly refer to the loan costs associated with a buyer getting a loan on a property. There are other costs such as attorney's fees, titles fees, home warranties, and many other things that make up the closing costs. But again, in a hot market, you may want to make your offer as strong as possible. So if you have the funds in your budget to cover a down payment and pay your closing costs, you may just want to put a big fat zero in that section of the purchase agreement. And comparatively, in a soft market, or if a house has been sitting and it has something about it that's caused it to not sell, you may be able to get some or all of your closing costs paid for by the seller so that they can be able to pick you up as a buyer and help get that house sold. The third thing we're going to need to put on the offer to show how serious of a buyer we are is the earnest money. A lot of people get this word confused and use the word deposit, and that is a close word to describing what earnest money is, but earnest money has a lot of other rules and ways that it gets treated, so we try not to refer to it as a deposit because we don't want people to get too confused about it. But earnest money is not given to the seller at the beginning of the contract. It's held by a trust company, and it actually goes to the buyer if they do make it to closing. But what we want to focus on in this video is that earnest money is a way of showing how serious of a buyer you are. So the more money you give in earnest money, the more serious you look as a buyer. But if you did default on the contract, there's certain ways that the seller has a right to that money if you wasted their time and went past all of your protection days. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to give it a quick example, if a buyer only puts $300 down on a $200,000 house, the seller is going to be thinking, this buyer is not very serious about wanting to buy my house. We usually recommend that you put up at least 1% of the purchase price. So on $200,000 house, that would be $2,000 in earnest money. But you can actually put even more if you want your offer to stand out and show how serious of a buyer you are. So if you wanted to double it and do like $4,000 earnest money on a $200,000 home, that's gonna give a lot of weight when the seller and the listing agent are reviewing your offer and looking at it versus other offers. And the fourth thing we're gonna need to put on the offer is what type of financing or what type of loan you're gonna get. Obviously, the best offer someone can have is a cash offer, which means they don't need a loan at all. They have enough funds to just buy the house for cash, just like you would walk into a store and buy a Coke. Cash buyers can close faster. They typically don't have to do an appraisal, and the seller doesn't have to worry about whether the buyer is going to approve for a loan or if the loan process is going to fall through in general. Cash buyers can close fast. They typically don't do an appraisal, and a seller doesn't have to worry about whether the buyer is going to approve for a loan or even deal with the loan process at all. Cash buyers are basically like a fast pass lane at a theme park. They go straight to the front. But most of us out there, including me, need to get some type of loan in order to purchase a home. So what type of loan we put, as well as how much of a down payment amount and even what lender we're working with, can be all taken into consideration when the listing agent and the seller are looking at your offer. The main types of loans out there are FHA, VA, conventional, and USDA, and each one of them has different loan conditions and restrictions. So for example, if a seller is looking at two buyers who make an offer on the same purchase price, and one's an FHA buyer and one's a conventional buyer, the FHA only has to give 3.5% down, whereas the conventional buyer can give anywhere from 5 to 40% of a down payment and has less restrictions, which can not only show that the conventional buyer has more in savings in the bank, but has less chances of a loan issue and therefore is a stronger chance of approving for the loan and could cause them to gain the edge and get their offer accepted over the FHA offer. So there are a lot of little factors that have to be considered than just the offer price. So earlier when we were talking about the earnest money, I said that we would talk later on about that a seller could end up with the buyer's money if they go past their protection days. The fifth item you'll need to decide on and can make your offer look stronger or weaker depending on what you put on this is the due diligence days. In Georgia, the due diligence period or days is the amount of time when you first go under contract that you can ask for to get things done like your inspections or contractor quotes, a lot of things like that. During the due diligence period, you can change your mind about the house and back out for any reason and not lose your earnest money. But for the seller, this amount of time is valuable because they're taking their house off the market during these days and are under contract with you. So the more days you ask for is the longer that the seller has to wait around to find out if you're moving forward or backing out. And that's a big deal because if you do back out, other buyers who made offers earlier could have already moved on and found other homes. And so they've got to go back on the market and start all over sometimes. But again, if you want to make your offer stand out, you may want to put just a few days in this section for the due diligence, or you might even need to put a 0 amount of days in this section. That doesn't mean that you can't get an inspection done or have contractors out to the house to give you quotes on repairs. It just means that you can't back out for any reason at all. You can still have protection days built into your financing period in which you can back out if you didn't approve for the loan somehow. But again, to make your offer look stronger, and if you've done a good job and you've got a good lender and you're already approved, another way you can make your offer look even stronger is to reduce or remove the amount of financing protection days you have. And the last big item, which I referred to earlier when we were talking about what type of financing you're getting and can have a big impact on the seller looking at your offer, is how much of a down payment you can give. The more down payment you put, the more it shows the seller how much you've saved up and how much you can afford. Why is this an important item to them? Because it shows that if money became an option along the way, you have the funds to back it up and make it happen. So even if you're going with a loan that allows for a smaller down payment, you may want to look at your budget and see if it allows you to put more of a down payment, which in return will show the seller and their agent that you have the extra money that can be used towards the purchase of a home, which can also make your offer stand out just a little bit more or differently than the rest. Well, that's it. That wraps up this video on making your best offer and understanding the terms of the contract, or what we call an agreement. Of course, there's a lot of other little terms and things that go into making an offer, or what we call an agreement. So feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and be sure to check out our other videos in this homebuyer series or our other videos in general. Feel free to comment below and subscribe to our channel and get even more helpful tips and tricks that'll help you find your next dream home.